All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we will get started. Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving to roll call. Commissioner Bowie?
Present.
Commissioner Faulkner?
Present.
Vice Chair Fizer?
Present.
Secretary Peterman?
Present.
Commissioner Shanks?
Present.
Mayor Turnbow?
Present.
And Chairman Wiggins. We do have two absent, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Urquia, but we do have 7 this evening. We have no personal appearances scheduled this evening, so we'll move into item 5, our consent agenda. We have one item, item A, approval of minutes from the November 19th, 2024 meeting. Would entertain a motion to dispose of that item.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Faulkner.
I move that we approve minutes from our November 19th, 2024 meeting.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Faulkner, second by Commissioner Bowie to approve the minutes from the November 19th, 2024 meeting. Any further discussion of the item? If not, all in favor? That'll pass unanimously, 7-0. Thank you. All right, so we'll now move into item 6, which is unfinished business. This is item A, original town block, 14 Alley, right-of-way vacation. This is a continuance of a public hearing from the November 19th meeting. So at this time, Mr. Zur, is there anything else to annotate for purposes of, other than a continuance of the public hearing?
This was a prior continuance of the public hearing. The prior continuance was requested by the applicant. In the past, the Planning and Zoning Commission has regularly provided a professional courtesy on the notion of these applications require approval of a majority of the whole commission as opposed to just a majority of a quorum. That was requested by the applicant last go around and approved by the commission. And this time you are missing 2 individuals from the commission, one of whom I believe may well have recused himself the last go around, one of whom identified that they would not be here early on following last meeting. So I believe you're ready to proceed forward at this particular point, but did want to provide at least a little bit of an explanation for the basis of the continuance.
Perfect, thank you, sir. So this is, again, unfinished business. Mr. Crest, to you or the applicant to get us started?
I will leave it to the commission. Typically, the applicant will make the presentation first, and I will follow with the staff report.
Very good. The applicant will please come forward and present your case.
Good evening again. Thank you for allowing us to continue from 2 weeks ago. Again, my name is Pam Hatcher. My address is 1403 North Madison, Raymore, Missouri. I'm here this evening regarding a property that I own in the old part of town at 303 South Washington. It is a 5,000 square foot building that does back up to some city-owned alleyway. I am a local resident that is committed to the betterment of our community. I also own a business, Integrity Group Real Estate, that also owns a additional building just 2 blocks away from there at 103 South Jefferson. I also, within the past 2 months, just around the corner from 303 South Washington, sold a house at 215 South Franklin, which was a very blighted residential home that I sold to an investor that is being greatly improved for our community. So I'm very dedicated to this section of town and want to make it greatly improved for all of us within the community. With that being said, I purchased this building back in February of 2020, and at the time, it was a vacant building approximately 3 weeks before COVID hit. I sat on a building for over a year with no tenant in place and was finally able to get a tenant in place in August of 2021 and survived that. I now have a dance studio in there that provides dance lessons to children from the age of 3 to 18 that occupies that building 7 days a week. I have a large parking lot in the front and I have a backyard in the back. I brought some drawings to better depict the rights of way because this is the building, this is the parking lot, this is Washington, and this is Olive. You can see the right of way right here depicted. The thing about the right of way, and I'll pass this around if you want, is that you cannot access this right of way from the street because there's a big ditch and there's a fire hydrant right there. The only way you can access that right-of-way is by traveling on this section that was built on my property and driving on my property and then getting onto the right-of-way. And then people are driving down here and then exiting through my side yard and then through my parking lot, which is completely trespassing and creating me a huge liability as this property owner with children attending this building on a daily basis. Again, regular trespassing, regular liability for a business owner. When you look at it from a larger scale, here, I enlarged it so you could see the ditch and the fire hydrant. From here, you can see the right-of-way goes all the way down. And again, you can't access this without trespassing on my property. If it's creating a liability for me, it's going to create a liability for the city as well. So I am requesting that the city vacate this right-of-way along my property line and allow me to fence this to protect my interest in my property.
Thank you.
I also have some video showing the cars trespassing on my property and exiting my property.
If the commission would like to see those, I can
Please.
pass them around.
Mr. Gress, were there videos or?
Yes, give me one moment. I will take control of the commission's screen and put it up on the projector. Just give me
Thank
one
you.
moment. So there are 7 individual clips. I'll just play them one by one, and if there's any questions, feel free to stop and ask me or the applicant any questions.
So this is where they enter from Olive Street and are going on the right-of-way now. This is where they're at the back of my property and where they would exit and make a right-hand turn at the south side of my property. You can go ahead and go to the next one.
Is
This is just showing them unloading. And here, oh, there they go. Down the south side of my property now. And entering in on my property again. And again. This is coming from even the other direction. And then that's exiting off onto my property again.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
of course.
All right, then turn it over to city staff.
Again, perfect.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. So as the applicant mentioned, this is a joint application between the two property owners that abut the alleyway right-of-way in question, with Mrs. Hatcher being the owner of 303 South Washington and the other applicant, Mrs. Plunkett, being the owner of 105 East Olive, which is the residential home that abuts right behind the dance studio that the applicant just talked about. They are jointly requesting to vacate the 14-foot alleyway that abuts approximately the 120 feet south of Olive Street that would constitute the portion that abuts their property directly. There's a couple maps within your packet that kind of depict that specific area in relation to the overall alley. There's also a couple survey drawings in there that were shown for references to the property lines and so forth. The existing property is located in the original town area, so both properties have the original town overlay district on top of them. One subject property is zoned R1 single family district, while the other one is zoned C1 neighborhood commercial, that being the dance studio building. The right-of-way area in question totals approximately 1,674 square feet, or 0.04 acres, in terms of what is being requested to be vacated. The item tonight does require a public hearing, so we advertised that initially in the October 30th edition of the North Cass Herald. As the chair mentioned, we did vote to continue that meeting until tonight. In addition to that, 11 notices were sent out to the property owners within 185 feet of the property. Those were sent back in the beginning in November. A little bit of history and some past actions in this area. The original plat of this area of Raymore, obviously the original town, was originally recorded in 1912. All 20 blocks within that area contain a 14-foot wide easement that's oriented north-south over the entirety of all 20 of those blocks. In the past, though, there have been three specific occasions where either the city or the property owners of other blocks have petitioned the city to vacate portions of those alleyways. So I'll kind of just go through a history of those. The first one would have been in May of 2003. First Baptist Church at the time requested to vacate the portion of the alleyway that ran through their block. The city did vote to approve that back in 2003. The Presbyterian Church also had a vacation. I could not find any formal records of when that took place, but our county records show that it was indeed vacated at some point in the past. And then most recently, the city owns Block 8, which is now TB Hanna Station Park. As the city was developing that to facilitate the plan that we had in place, we vacated the alleyway and provided an easement instead of the alleyway for the utilities that cross through that for the purposes of developing that as a park within the original town neighborhood. Additionally, kind of back in 2003, we also had a request from the First Baptist Church to vacate the right-of-way within the street along Adams Street. That did end up making it to the council, where it was eventually denied due to the impact of the traffic there within the streets along original town. The property there at 303 South Washington was built in the 1970s, and then following here in the early 2000s, a lot split was approved in 1998, which created the subject property at 105 East Olive. They segmented those two lots to create two new parcels, and the home there at 105 East Olive was completed in the year 2000. On page 3 of the staff report, I kind of provided a snippet of the section of code that would address the vacation of public streets or right-of-way or alleyways within the city. It kind of provides the definitions of what constitutes right-of-way, alleyway, and so forth, and the methods in which the city controls those. A little bit of background as staff did some research and kind of looking at all of the alleyways in original town. This current alleyway is currently in an unimproved condition, meaning it contains only grassy areas that are not necessarily, in staff's opinion, appropriate for traffic. There's only a few portions of the alleyways in original town that have been improved for use of vehicles, meaning they're either paved or they have some sort of gravel hard surface on them. The most recent project that the commission may be familiar with would be the villas that are there on Monroe Street. They actually have a concrete paved alley. They have all rear-loaded garages. So that is another alleyway that is being fully utilized. The bulk of staff's research kind of uncovered that very few of the alleyways are in an improved state through the entirety of them, meaning they really just provide access into a couple of the properties off of the roads there in original town. During some of our research, we did note several potential encroachments or non-conforming setbacks for things like sheds or garages within the right-of-way. Fences, sheds, or general structures. There's a couple of wood piles, a couple kind of debris piles and things like that. Staff did note that those are likely to be also within the city's alleyway. There's also a significant number of alleys that contain overgrowth and trees, some fire hydrants within some of those alleyways and things like that. So generally pretty inconsistent with the condition of all the alleyways across Original Town within some of the properties within that part of the city. Whenever a right-of-way is vacated by the city, within the code, the statutory right of reversion and the owners abutting those properties, if it is to be vacated, it is then divided evenly among the property owners that adjoin them. So technically right down the middle, and then it becomes the property owner's responsibility for maintenance, which in this case, in the staff report, I think I also noted, the city does not maintain the alleyways in terms of mowing the grass or repairing any thing outside of maybe some of the ditches on the perimeter of the blocks, but in terms of cutting the grass, repairing any damage, that does fall back to the property owners to maintain them. And so in this case, if it were to be vacated and revert back to the property owners, that would not change. A couple snippets I included from our Original Town plan. This is one of our neighborhoods that does have an adopted plan for it. It was completed in 2009, and I included 2 snippets in there that kind of address the alleyways. In general, the code is pretty silent on the use of alleyways or how those should be addressed. But the Original Town plan did provide for at least the recognition of the alleyways in the sense that they provide access to parking areas. None of the alleyways being maintained by the city. That was the case back in 2009 as it is today. And then again, in very few cases, the alleyways do contain informal driveways that are used for parking vehicles, in some cases for accessing accessory buildings throughout properties within that area of town. And then in addition to the overlay plan and the neighborhood plan, there is also a set of design guidelines that were adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council as kind of a supplemental document. And so it does say in there, it does recommend that alleyways should generally not be vacated and should be utilized for site access where they're compatible with adjoining residential development. In our research, this property does abut a commercial property and a residential property. There are no parking areas on either of those properties that need to be accessed by the alleyway, unlike some other areas that you'll find in the Original Town. So in staff's research and kind of our assessment is that staff didn't necessarily deem these as compatible with the adjoining residential development in this case. So staff would make the assumption that we could entertain vacating the alley, which is why we're here this evening. I did want to touch on the city in this part of Original Town does maintain the utilities, obviously. In the alleyway, there is a water line that provides access for the water connections for the properties, and then the sewer lines are actually along the streets. So what you'll find in the packet here, trying to understand how we would maintain access to the water line. What we've done in the past with the other vacations is upon the vacation of the alleyway, you in turn dedicate a utility easement that provides the city and other private utilities access to the overhead power lines, the underground water. It would essentially function just like any other utility easement we have in the city. City would still have access to repair the water meters, and so forth. The same would go with Evergy, any other utility companies, et cetera. The one difference here, as I mentioned, fences cannot encroach into the right-of-way. We do prohibit that by city code. So the purpose of the vacation would be to essentially convert that to utility easement, allowing the applicants to build a fence to solve the issues that they are experiencing on their property. Within your packet, again, I did provide a property survey and kind of delineating the alleyway from the properties, as well as some site photographs that staff had taken, as well as some photographs that the applicant provided as part of their application. Staff did also submit their proposed findings of fact in the packet for your consideration. Overall, that would conclude my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Before we move into public comments section, do any commissioners have any questions of either the applicant or city staff before
Quick, yeah, I got a quick
Please,
one.
yes, Mr.
Just curious, is the other, there's 2 applicants, right? Is the other applicant here or?
She is, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Just curious.
All right, before we go into public comment, does anybody have any final questions? All right, so we will move into the public comment section of this case. We do ask that anybody that comes forward, please double check that the green light is on the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record, and also please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. If you have comments that are identical to what somebody else has said, can you please just kind of say, I agree with XYZ, as opposed to saying the same thing for 5 straight minutes, just to keep us on time. With that, we'd entertain anybody to come forward and make comments. Please say your name and address for the record, and then I guess, again, we allow 5 minutes for comment.
Okay. I'm Chuck Weedman, as attorney for Karen and William Russ. And would the Russ wave their hands at least for the commissioners? The Russ live at 306 Franklin, have lived there for 29 years, and have continuously, for 29 years, utilized this alleyway to access their backyard. Their backyard abuts to the alleyway. It's a drive-through alley. I would comment that the depiction that Ms. Hatcher showed obviously shows that the alley is being used by the public, whether it be for automobile or pedestrian use, and it's been used for years. It was dedicated in 1912, so some 112 years ago. This pull-through alley, you cannot, if you can't drive through it from one end to the other, you can't turn around but for pulling onto someone else's yard. And Ms. Hatcher says that she thinks it poses a danger to her property or children that might be at the dance studio. Well, she can fence her property up to her existing property line right now and prevent a car from driving somehow, or as she says, trespassing on her side yard. I just want to stress what staff found, and that is your own design guidelines recommend that alleyways should not be vacated. And so this alley obviously has utilities, and at times would have fire trucks. It could have the water department or other utilities accessing this alleyway. The Rusts have used it for years, and they want to continue to do so. I would also note that Mary and John Horan are here, also in opposition to the vacation of this alleyway, because if they can't pull through and drive through from Olive Street and the other direction, they can't turn around in the alley without being on private property. So, Ms. Hatcher's concerns about fencing it, she wants to fence off her half the alley to deny pedestrians and the public from driving through and utilizing an alley that's been there for years. It should also be noted that there's not sidewalks on Franklin Street. There's not sidewalk on the side of Washington Street, and pedestrians use this alleyway to walk to the park, which is located another block away. I think that's enough said. Okay?
Thank you, sir. The public comment section is still open, so if anybody else would like to come forward, please say your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Karen Rust, and I live at 306 South Franklin Street in Old Town, Raymore. And I've lived there for 29 so years, and I love my community. It's a very close-knit. We know our neighbors, and I've never had a problem with anybody. I have used the alley over this amount of time, and this includes not only myself, my husband, family members, neighbors, and hired workers that have worked for us, commercial tree services to trim and haul away limbs and brush from our 75-year-old oaks, which we did not plant, but we just inherited. And every time there's a storm that comes through, they drop a lot of debris, and we have to have tree service come and take those away, because we don't burn wood. We have to get the brush away. We had, about 4 years ago, we had severe damage back there, and it cost us in excess of $4,000 for this tree service to come out and do it. This 6 months ago, we had a big windstorm, and we had to have that same tree service come back out, and that was to the tune of about $1,800, and it damaged one of our sheds also. But their trucks had to come in, and there were like 6 trucks out there with the booms that go up and cut all the limbs, and they had a hard time. They had to come in, and then they had to back out because of the 2 illegal bushes that were planted in this alleyway. The alleyway is a public area and not a private lawn to be planted. But I'm sure the plantings were there for a barrier to keep us from utilizing the alley. Anyway, I spoke with Mr. Gress about this plantings blocking the alley, and he indicated that it wasn't his department, and he would have to talk with Michael Kress, who was the Public Works Director at the time, and he was on leave with no definite date of return, and he would get back with me. And that did never happen. And that was prior to the wooden posts that went around the plantings. So if you can imagine a landscaping area where you would put decorative wooden posts around for like a edging around these plants, that's what was in the alley around these 2 bushes in this barrier. So anybody that would have tried to get through there, they would have even more difficult of a time because of these, you know, would damage their car or whatever that was going through there. And I couldn't get an answer about why this was allowed to happen. And it's, you know, in the city of Raymore adopts some of the statutes for the state of Missouri as far as streets and alleyways. And they, from what I read, it's not proper to block the alleyway because it doesn't belong to any individual, it belongs to the city. And I found that very upsetting to me that this would be allowed to go on. Anyway, you know, the pictures that were submitted show that the alleyway is being utilized. And I am one that has driven my car to deliver bird seed. I'll go pick up 40-pound bags of bird seed, like 4 and 6 at a time, and deliver them to the back of my property because they're very heavy. I can get them out of the truck and drag them to the back end of my outbuilding. But that's the reason I go back there. I've had workmen come back and work on our deck, replacing that, haul mulch in. I mean, it's utilized all the time for that type of work. And I just don't feel like vacating this for a private individual for their own use is warranted. I mean, we're in Old Town, and Old Town's got all these alleys all over, and it's for the use of the public.
I will say we
So-
are at 5 minutes. If you have one last comment or anything, I'll give you that time, but we are
No,
at
I could
5
go
minutes.
on forever, so
Very good.
I don't have a really good concept of time.
No worries, not a problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. The microphone is open. Anybody's welcome at any time. give one last opportunity, otherwise I will close the public comment, which all comments then will be, well, that'll be the end of any comments regarding this from members of the public. So if any last opportunities? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing at this time. It is 6:30. And at that, we usually then turn it over to members of the commission for questions, either city staff or further questions of the applicant or clarifications based on public comment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I have a little bit of a question, and it might be for Ms. Russ or her attorney. I assume, Ms. Hatcher, that the photos you've provided us provide the assessor's property lines in a correct manner. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I did not bring surveys
Okay.
because I didn't think
But,
that.
so Ms. Russ or Mr. Weedman, I see that the shed in question that they access has some overlap into that 14-foot area. Is that, from the staff legal perspective, is that an appropriate location for a shed with regard to an alleyway?
So I guess I want to give a little history on that comment specifically and maybe answer some of the questions that were just brought up here. As staff started their research based on the complaint that we got about the shrubs that were planted in the alleyway, admittedly, the encroachments into the alleyway in general are not permitted. As staff walked some of the alleyways in Original Town, as I mentioned in the staff report, we found that there are several areas where there are other encroachments into the alleyway, whether it be accessory buildings or sheds, or there are several wood piles that residents have kind of stocked up in the back portion of their property. I found several debris piles like pallets and things like that. So in working with the resident that complained about the trees that were there, the thing that staff was trying to work through was how do we tell a resident that you can't plant shrubs here when there are all these other encroachments that are throughout Original Town. Within the overlay district there in Original Town, in order to really utilize the alleyways, there is a requirement that the sheds be set back an additional 20 feet from the alleyway to provide, essentially parking for a vehicle if it were parking back there. The shed in question, staff would consider more of a non-conforming use at this point, or non-conforming structure. And that's what we would generally consider most of the structures in Original Town. And what that means is that it's okay in its current location, assuming that it doesn't encroach into the alleyway. It does not necessarily have to meet that 20-foot setback. It would be more or less, grandfathered in. We wouldn't permit a new shed in there. We've had a couple. One of the churches there in Original Town has constructed a new accessory building probably 3-4 years ago. They did have to move that back 20 feet from where they originally proposed it based on that code requirement. But that was one of the things that staff was trying to wrestle with and trying to address the problem that was brought to us on those shrubs, is that as we walk the alleyways, there are other encroachments that are technically not permitted by code as well. And so staff was just trying to figure out how do we address the inconsistencies in that fairly. Some of the background of how we tried to approach this would have been looking at the alleyways comprehensively. That was kind of the nature of the assessment that we did of walking them and trying to see what other issues there were, how many alleyways were paved or improved. That was kind of the basis for our research. What we ended up finding, and through that research, is that as some of the residents mentioned, the access to the alleyway is important to some of those residents, obviously. And so going through the process to vacate the entirety of that alleyway, which we've done, the 3 other cases that I mentioned, staff didn't think that was the best idea because it does take away the access. It would have taken away the access if we were to vacate the entire portion of the alleyway or proceed with that. Rather, we worked with the 2 applicants that are here this evening. They had the right to petition the city to vacate simply the portions that abut their property only. There would, if this were to move forward and end up being vacated, it would preserve the access to the alleyway and the rear properties from Plum Street on the south side. As one of the residents mentioned, that kind of forces folks to then, you have to find some spot to turn around without going on somebody else's property. That's been one of the things we've been trying to balance from the applicant side of things is, even with the alleyway being fully intact right now, there's still instances where you're having to pull through somebody else's property outside of the alleyway. The other thing that we ended up finding, and not the case with every specific block, would be the fire hydrant and the drainage ditch that are at the end of this specific alleyway. To get around that fire hydrant, you do have to kind of encroach on private property to get around it, and then you make your way back into the alleyway. If you look at the opposite end on Plum, the drainage culvert is a little better constructed. It's more of a paved driveway that's being used there, more similar with some of the other usages of the alleyways in Original Town. You do not have to get around a light pole or a power pole or a fire hydrant to access that portion of the alleyway. So in our, again, just to kind of close that, in our research, we kind of felt that the plans that we do have adopted say to look at the vacation of alleyways pretty closely. In our research here and looking at this, it does make sense in staff's mind to proceed forward with vacating this portion simply along the two properties that are here this evening as the applicants. It addresses what they're experiencing in terms of the potential for trespassing, and it does preserve the access to the alleyway from the other side of the block, which again became evident that it was important as we were fielding the phone calls from some of the neighbors and residents in Original Town. A long-winded answer of saying there are other areas in Original Town alleyways that have encroachments.
Well, in
yes.
your answer too, I was going to ask about the, still having access to that particular shed. Looks like it'd be pretty easily done from Plum Street, from the south there. Because it's about, that thing's placed right midsection of this section of the block. Anyway, so it's, it looks like it's an equal distance between the, between Plum and Olive. Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I had.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
I had Mr. Gress, kind of going along those, you know, because it looks like that's a fairly new fire hydrant, and that's just like smack dab, looking at Google Maps, Street View. We have raised utilities, you've got an electric pole, and then you have pretty much a brand new looking fire hydrant, at least whenever this drive-by was taken. Looks like October according to Google. I mean, other than that, at the edge, there's a culvert there that I assume is on Miss Hatcher's property, and that's like 4 feet away. So, I mean, Public Works, whether it's a new one or not, put a fire hydrant essentially right in the middle of the alleyway to begin with. So now the alleyway is essentially blocked because that culvert doesn't go the whole way, right? I mean, it's a drainage ditch in front of it. So the only way to access it is trespassing on Miss Hatcher's property. So I guess the question, you know, that Mr. Wheatman made the recommendation that the fence could be extended further. Is there restriction to Ms. Hatcher bringing her fence closer to the street that would then prevent people from illegally crossing through her property? One, and also the Mr. Wheatman made the recommendation that you know, in order to turn around, you have to trespass through people's property. So is there something that can be done, such as bringing the fence out or removing the culvert to extend the drainage ditch to make it, because people are essentially driving through Ms. Hatcher's property over a culvert in order to get to the alleyway. So I guess my inquiry is regarding the applicant, are there things, if a vacation weren't to occur, that can be done by the property owner? Are they restricted to where their fence is located, or are they allowed to build it further out towards the street that would then essentially prevent trespassing on their property, and property damage for that matter, because as you're driving through someone's property, that's property damage, as well as going down to the end of the property, and we saw trucks just driving through, which isn't even an alleyway, then you're essentially driving straight through someone's side yard. So just curious about those two things. So those are things that stick out based on public comments by Mr. Wheatman and how to address those.
Sure. In terms of the fence, without the vacation, you would not be able to construct a fence any more closer into the alleyway to encroach there. Correct. But the code would allow for, in this case, it is a corner lot, so that chain link fence that's on that property, it kind of encloses that back, what used to be a playground, I think, when it was a daycare. That chain link fence could be extended all the way up to the property line along Olive Street.
That's what I was inquiring about.
It would then, you know, follow that property line and make it a little more difficult to access the alleyway without encroaching, because then you'd be hitting the fence that would be there.
Or the fire hydrant that's right in the middle.
Correct. But in general, the code would allow for that chain link fence to be extended further towards Olive Street. It would not allow for it to be extended any further towards the alleyway.
Right.
They could also extend the fence on the opposite side of the property right now, on the, I guess what would be the south side, the fence, the code would allow a fence to be constructed on that side of the property as well. As I mentioned, in this case, this is just a pre-existing fence that used to be a play area. But to answer your question there, the code would allow that. And that would probably be my answer to your second question of other things that could potentially be done without vacating the alleyway, whether that would satisfy the concerns or the potential liabilities of the two applicants. I can't speak to that, but the code
Sure.
would allow those things for sure.
So then I guess maybe the second part maybe goes towards Mr. Salisbury. If a culvert, I would assume, was potentially placed there by either a previous property owner or Public Works at some point. The whole street minus that 10-foot section is all just drainage ditch. Is the property owner allowed to just remove a culvert? Because it probably was used for their own access at some point, but if they no longer want access to that back corner of their property, could they remove the culvert, thus reconstructing the drainage ditch, which, you then have to legally drive through a ditch and over a fire hydrant to then access the alley?
So you're talking about filling the ditch in, basically?
No, so it looks like the ditch is filled in because of a culvert that's on private property. So since that's not part of the alleyway, could the property owner remove the culvert, or is that something that is a Public Works? Because if people are literally trespassing through someone's property by driving over the culvert, and that's their own private property, is it possible to remove the culvert and then thus creating an issue? And maybe Ms. Hatcher knows the answer to that question, so I don't know if maybe it's not a. Sorry, I know that's like.
I'm happy to answer. Before the daycare, the building owner actually had and the only reason I know this is because I gutted the building. There was actually a garage door on the back, and the previous owner put that culvert in there so that they actually brought a car in before that fence was put in for the daycare and pulled the car in to the back of the building. Okay. So that's what the previous owner did, put that in there. Then after that, the building was converted to a daycare. Then it sat vacant for several years. Then I purchased it. So yes, that would be an alternative that I could, pull all that out.
Okay.
So
I just didn't know if it, from a Public Works perspective.
Generally, we don't maintain ditches around town, and so obviously they'd have to work with us to do it to make sure that the road's not going to flood or something like that, but
Okay.
it would be a possibility.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Faulkner.
probably a question for Mr. Salisbury, but also comment to you. Looking at the survey, Olive Street looks like a 66-foot width, and I doubt that the pavement is 66 feet. So my assumption is that culvert is actually on city right-of-way for Olive Street, Mr. Salisbury?
Yeah, generally they're all, ditches are still in the city right away, but we don't maintain them.
Yeah, understood. So that's.
So the private property owner can maintain.
Yeah, comment to Chairman Wiggins was, I think the culvert is actually probably not part of Mrs. Hatcher's property. It's part of city right-of-way, but again, not maintained.
My sidewalk is on utility right away, but I have to maintain it and everything, so.
Well, true.
Yeah. Okay. Additional question. I've got other questions, but I'd love for other people to have a chance to ask.
I'll ask one more.
Yes, sir, please.
Hearing the comments so far, looking at the maps, looking at the situation, apparently now there are people who drive through the alleyway, even though it's not maintained there toward Olive Street. They drive in, conduct some business, keep on driving, but vehicles have reverse, and if it was vacated, I'm wondering, wouldn't it be practical for a vehicle to drive in the remaining alleyway and unload whatever, and you back out to Plum?
Yeah, because Plum is, if you look, Plum is, it's a gravel driveway that accesses the alley. Or at least that's how it looks. That could be somebody's property too, that somebody then would have to also be driving on. But. Other commissioners have any additional questions for city staff or the applicant or regarding any of the testimony we heard today? No. Okay. Seeing none and the public hearing is closed, this time I would entertain a motion to dispose of the item.
Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I make a recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case number 24022, original town block 14 alley vacation for lots 5 through 10 to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mayor Turnbow, second by Commissioner Bowie, for the Planning and Zoning Commission to accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case number 24022, original town block 14 alley vacation for lots 5 through 10 to the City Council with a recommendation of approval that does include the one recommended condition as outlined. Any further discussion of this motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? That will pass unanimously, 7-0. All right, thank you. All right, so that will conclude our unfinished business for tonight. We have no new business, so with that, I would then turn it over to Mr. Zur if there's a City Council report since our previous meeting, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to provide the City Council report this evening. City Council did have the opportunity to meet in legislative session on November 25th, 2024. At that time, there were 4 items. I'm sorry, Chairman.
No
My
worries.
apologies
So-
for the
yeah.
confusion.
If you would, if you're done with our meeting, please make your way to the hallway. Otherwise, we do welcome you to stay and listen.
There were 4 items for consideration at the City Council meeting that had come before the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for your interest and for future guidance. The first was the Timber Ridge rezoning, the R1 Plan District to R2 designation. This was a second reading and was approved by the council. That's 17.33 acres located approximately at Dean Avenue and Johnston Drive. Next item on the council's agenda that was considered and voted upon was the Whitetail Run PUD rezoning and the preliminary plat. There was a public hearing that was held on this. This was a first reading, and it was approved by the council after significant discussion and analysis. This was the application from Tyler Salee to change the zoning from an R1 to a PUD, allowing for the creation and construction of 503 lots on approximately 185 acres. Next item on the agenda that the council considered for the 25th was the Cunningham 4th plat. That's the final plat. That was up for a second reading. It also received approval. This was a Cooper Land Development application with located at 155th Street in Madison, providing for 40 single-family lots to be constructed. The final was the Parkside second and final plat. This was also a second reading and was approved. Developer was Dan Carr on that matter, located approximately 163rd Street and Sunset Lane. Again, second read and approved by the council. So those were all items that had previously come before the commission. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on them. Mr. Gress, Mr. Salisbury, and Mayor Turnbow were all present for those council meetings as well and would be happy to provide additional input, I'm sure.
Any additional comments, gentlemen?
Nothing further to add.
That
Thank
would
you, sir.
conclude my report.
All right, I'll turn it over to staff report. Mr. Kress.
Thank you, sir. I only have a few items. I'll be following up tomorrow with our department report for the month of November. I didn't have a chance to get that in the packet before it was finished. But a couple of things I wanted to note that you'll find in there. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, Chick-fil-A is nearing the end of their construction, so trying to keep the conversation going with regards to traffic control to keep that under control. They are still targeting the second or third month of January, or week of January, I'm sorry, for their opening. So that'll be exciting to look forward to. The Baskin Robbins there that's opening in the Raymore Galleria, they are hopeful to finish their final inspections in the next week or two. So hopefully some news that I can share with you all here soon on when they intend to open their location here in Raymore. And then lastly, just looking at the remaining meetings for the year, I think I mentioned to the commission a few weeks ago, we did get an application for a rezoning and preliminary plat for what was once the Prairie at Carroll Farms over there off Kurzweil. And so we had started reviewing that application and had a good neighbor meeting last week. After a couple of our meetings, the applicant did request to withdraw their application from the consideration. So at this point, there is no need to have a meeting on December 17th, unless the commission has any items that they would like brought forward. I would also anticipate we may be likely to have a meeting, the first one in January, so stay tuned for that. But at this time, unless there's any business that the commission wants to consider, I do not think we need to have the meeting on the 17th.
Is there any additional clarification information regarding why the applicant pulled their application? Just didn't seem feasible based on,
Some of the staff comments that we had given to them based on the rezoning that they were asking for and the size of that development just didn't seem to be something that they were willing to budge on. And so we did have a few phone calls on that we were trying to address, but at the end of the day, they just felt that it was better to pull that for consideration, at least for the time being. So yeah, at this time, we will not be reviewing that application any further.
thank you, sir. Sorry, just dropped something. Mr. Salisbury, anything from you, sir?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing on 163rd? We getting closer to moving that sign?
We are getting closer. It looks like it's going to be the December 23rd meeting, not the December 9th meeting. So,
Anything, Mr. Mayor, to add for, obviously, from city council, you didn't have anything, but from staff reports, obviously.
No, I do, given the last case that was just heard, while upon exiting the room, one of the individuals that, and I want this on the record, one of the individuals that opposed the application this evening made a veiled threat to the applicants, which indicated that there might be a physical threat, and I want that on the record to be known so that if the complainant wishes to file a complaint with the police department, there's a potential that the individual committing the violation could be charged with disorderly conduct. And I want that on the record.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully we have an identification on that individual. If you could provide that for Emily so she can put that in the record, I would appreciate it.
Very good. All right, so now we move to item 10, which is our public comment. At this time, we always welcome anybody. If anybody has any additional comments they'd like to make this evening in front of the commission, we welcome you at this time.
Pam Hatcher, 1403 North Madison, Raymore, Missouri. I'd just like to take a moment to thank you all. I happen to be the chairman of the Board of Adjustments for the city of Raymore, and I know the amount of time that it takes out of your personal schedules to come and serve on this committee, and I want to express my sincere appreciation to each and every one of you for doing this, because I know 2 weeks ago I asked for a continuance, and I know that that caught many of you off guard, and I appreciate you all coming back and letting me present again tonight. And I sincerely appreciate all the time that you serve on this committee, because I know it's time consuming and it takes away from your families. So thank you all very much and have a happy holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. Any additional public comment at this time? All right, we will move on to commission member comments. I'm just going to start all the way at the end. Commissioner Bowie, sir.
I appreciate you guys' work that you did in terms of, that you always do, staff. In terms of the case we had earlier, I just wanted to state that I didn't see any real need to leave that alley open. There was no real need that was presented to me, and I think that the building that's there offers services to our community as well. I was a little uncomfortable with the encroaching upon the private property. I thought that was an unfortunate thing. But I appreciate the work you guys put in for it. Glad to be back, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner Shanks?
Tonight, I would like to highlight actually Chair Wiggins. I think every meeting, not just tonight, you do a great job of keeping us on pace, and we have efficient meetings. And being the Parliament person that you are, it takes skill, and I just want to acknowledge that. And working with Mr. Zier too from time to time to make sure everything flows smoothly, it just helps expedite these meetings. And I wish my meetings in my corporate life were as efficient. So thank you both.
Thank you. I will say that it's weird to hear that, because I'm definitely the one in my meetings that everybody's like, Matt, stop talking. So thank you. I appreciate that. Secretary Peterman.
Thank you, staff, for all your hard work.
Commissioner Faulkner, sir.
Well, first, I would like to concur with Commissioner Bowie and Commissioner Shanks, and thank you to staff. I thought the staff report was very well done, very thorough, and you know that I don't always completely agree with staff, but I always value the input and the research from staff. So thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Vice Chair Fizer.
Well, first I'd like to thank Commissioner Faulkner for his service with our commission. When you leave, I'm going to be the person who's been here the longest. I was going to say the oldest, but I'm not going to say that. But anyway, you've been very helpful when I have to occasionally sit in this chair and you're like, do this, and I'm like, that really helps. 'Cause I'm like, what do I do next? I appreciate that, and I've enjoyed working with you these last 10, I think 11 years. So just want to say good luck with everything you do, and I want to remind everyone that the mayor's Christmas tree lighting is this Friday, and if you haven't been to the mayor's Christmas tree lighting, you should definitely go because it's like being in a Hallmark movie. You may find romance, I don't know. But,
You may see Hallmark in the corner with a camera.
you just might, but anyway, it's really just a warm town feeling, and I think everyone should go.
Thank you. Mayor Turnbow, sir.
Before the.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Before you speak, is this Commissioner Faulkner's last meeting?
Yes, sir.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, there will be a new appointment.
Oh, well, let me on the record say thank you. I appreciate it. I'm the third member. I think I've been here 9 years. So I appreciate all you've done. So I didn't get that on the record. You can go ahead, Mayor.
No, I appreciate it too. I was going to talk about that as well. Mr. Faulkner has served diligently for 22 years now on this board. He's seen a lot of changes. He definitely has seen a lot of changes. And he's been a part of that progress as well. And Mr. Faulkner, thank you so much for your service and volunteerism. To volunteer for anything for that period of time is quite an endeavor, and we appreciate your time and effort that you put into it. And again, I'm just going to echo what everybody else said. Thanks to staff, well prepared for us tonight, and I appreciate that. Did a little observation on my own, and I know that this board came to the right conclusion on this, and as was evidenced by the outburst, that was unfortunate. But anyway, thank you to staff again, and Matt as well. Thank you for your leadership running this board. So appreciate it. Have a good evening, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to city staff as always. Thank you very much for everything. Mr. Faulkner, I got to sit next to you for a number of years before I became chairman, and I would like to think that maybe some of my efficiencies come from sitting next to you. And I will forever wonder how many things I will overlook in the future in these packets, because I could always rely on you and I've never been able to read the chicken scratch, and I'm sure it's totally legible to you, but you never missed anything, and I am very grateful for that, and I do thank you for all of your commitment and leadership here over the years. Mr. Zur does have a hand up.
If I might, real quickly, I also want to commend Commissioner Faulkner for his years of service. I have been coming here for 2 decades as well, so it is very nice to have learned and grown with you throughout the course of those 2 decades. Appreciated the opportunity to continue to work with you.
And vice versa, Mr. Zur.
Final couple of things. One, I am looking forward to, I know we've talked about some possible amendments to our code, and I look forward to seeing some of those. I know the sign code, for instance, is one that is a big item that's kind of sitting out there and need of updating. So I look forward to hopefully seeing that in the new year. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be safe, just be a good neighbor. This is the time of year to just smile and have a good time. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Mr. Faulkner, one more time, sir.
I move that we adjourn this evening's meeting.
I got a motion by Commissioner Faulkner, second by Secretary Peterman. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
I have the last 16 minutes recorded, so if you need anything from the point when we knew that it was out to the end, let me know, okay?
When you've done